let's say the March Planning Commission meeting, we would go to the briefing in February, so a month prior. And we would go to the briefing the day prior to the meeting as well, just to kind of educate them on what the project is. There's always a lot of questions with TIF. We also don't do very many of them, so there's years in which we don't do any. And so there's always turnover with the commission, and this is our opportunity to kind of educate what you should be looking at as a planning commissioner. Here's the project, lay it out for them so that they could get a lot of their questions answered prior to the actual public hearing.
That briefing, is that a public meeting?
It is.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a public noticed meeting, yes.
Do you allow, does the parties involved, neighbors have a chance to speak at that? Or do they only have a chance to speak at the actual?
Just at the actual hearing. The purpose of our briefing is to go through the agenda with the planning commission and just let them know if there's going to be any new information or addendums. But we don't actually discuss the items in detail at the briefing. Yep. But it is open to the public, yes.
Okay.
A lot of what we do at the briefing specific to TIF is just reminding them what they should be looking at, what they should be reviewing, because ultimately, we, as a land use, decision maker, that's more of what they're focused on versus let's get more into the finances of how the TIF district and what the agreement, or actual TIF agreement would be. But we do highlight all of that as well with them. But a lot of it's just kind of making sure they're understanding what they need to be reviewing and looking at when reviewing the TIFs. We notice our taxing entities, which typically is the county, the school district, and every once in a while a rural water district that we have in Sioux Falls. We do offer presentations to the county and the school district. Typically, the county does take us up on those offers, and we do go present to the county commission. They ultimately don't take an official vote on it, but they do review it and provide us any comments or feedback that they may have on us creating a TIF district. The school district typically hasn't asked us to do the presentation, but they are ultimately noticed and made aware of it. After all the review, we'll make a recommendation, and then we'll head to Planning Commission and City Council. Typically with City Council, we'll go to an informational meeting, which is a meeting that's held just to present informational items, and then they have ability to ask us questions on the items, so it's not an official hearing. And then we do go to first and second readings for our ordinances. Typically, we try to bring, at least in the more recent TIFs that we've done, we try to bring the district, so the boundary, the plan, and the agreement all at the same time. We don't have to do it that way. In the past, we take the steps of doing the boundary first, then the plan, then the agreement. But a lot of the city council would like to see everything up front and everything all together. And so probably the last 5 or 6 we've done, they've all kind of been presented all at once in current meetings.
Just a couple more points. Obviously, since we're representing the administration, we do review these with the mayor to make sure that the mayor is on board and understanding what's going forward. And then also, our city council has what they call an informational meeting, and on occasion they'll ask for just another TIF 101 presentation, again to remind them of what this process is all about. So that's why it says city council meetings plural, because sometimes it may be more than one.
The question I have is, have you ever had one that gets as far as that to go forward with the city council that the city council has rejected? That's one question. And the second one is, you work with the applicants so that you know that, if they come through and they meet all the qualifications, but say they want extra dollars that you don't think is fair, do you allow that to go through and have the council accept or reject it?
So I don't recall one that we've rejected in our time, but that's because we do a lot of vetting prior to even bringing it to them. To your second question, I'll get a little bit more into how we come up with numbers in terms of what we're willing to support as a staff and what we're bringing forward to the city council in terms of the amount requested. And I'll show you examples.
But the quick answer is that we, on numerous occasions, we're recommending less than what the total reimbursable could be. And Dustin will explain why that is.
This may be a question for your upcoming slide on certification of expenses, but we got a question about, I'm going to use the term non-traditional reimbursement costs. You mentioned the water filtration process.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a reimbursable expense? Because what I'm thinking of is that we, I don't know, Stacy, do we still have a LUS program going here? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I'm thinking that because we've got a lot of storage tanks that used to be underground, and that recovery process and cleaning up that water or removing that water, whatever it takes, is that what you would consider?
Yeah, some of the eligible expenses were some of the dewatering that was necessary during the construction of the project. So, you know, in a lot of these areas where you have high water levels, you're going to continue to have that high water level come up into your construction project. And so that was one thing that we do have, just because of the level of contamination in our groundwater when it comes through that quartzite. So, you know, all the veins of the quartzite hold some of the contamination, and as water comes up, it brings it into the development. And so ultimately, we work closely, when we have projects just downtown, we work closely with our companies that do the soil exploration to tell us what the actual contamination is. And that's something that the developer obviously hires and does that. But then we also, you know, are making sure that they're working with the state DNR to understand what the contamination is and what the plan is for the cleanup, because they're going to ultimately come up with what they need to do to make that site ready for development. And so there's in a lot of these, there's a lot of communication between all those entities to make sure that they're doing it correctly. But ultimately, environmental remediation in terms of, you know, removing contaminated dirt, hauling it to the landfill, the dewatering in some cases is something that we've allowed as eligible expenses in terms of cleaning up the site. Now, the ongoing dewatering, the filtering system is not something that will obviously continue to.
Would that be covered under the life of the TIF, or?
Well, we can only cover, in a TIF district, you can only pay for eligible expenses for the first 5 years in which the district's created. So after year 5, we can't pay for it after the TIF. And that's regulated by state law.
Okay.
So you all, oh, I'm sorry, Darla.
Do you have any idea how many TIF applications you get and then how many make it through the process? And do you think the $2,500 is a deterrent to people that, you know, kind of sifts out who's really serious and thinks they can make it through your process?
Yeah, so one of the things that Mike said is that we really do review this with our administration and the mayor, or whoever that may be at the time. And like I said, we're doing a lot of pre-application meetings. We're truly vetting these up front with the developer. And we're making the developer responsible for submitting to us and telling us why they should be receiving this TIF. So they have to understand our guidelines. They have to understand what they should be submitting to us, what eligible expenses they can be. They need to bring all that to the table and convince us that, you know, this project's eligible for TIF. And ultimately, at least since I've been here in the 5 years, I'm not aware of a TIF application that we took that did not get approved.
But I think how many discussions have we had that didn't go forward?
Yeah, we've had lots of conversation that are before we actually submit an application, because that really starts the process. We're notifying counselors, we're notifying planning commission, taxing entities, and so we have a lot of those conversations up front, and ultimately, you know, a lot of them have dropped off and just not pursued taxing permit financing.
But that's still a pretty small number, don't you say?
Yeah, I mean, there's maybe a handful over the last 5 years that we've had serious conversations on TIF. I mean, every once in a while we get a random question of, how do I get a TIF in town? But we don't consider that a real project conversations. There's probably only been a handful of those that have come forward that ultimately just didn't apply.
And then is the application fee a deterrent?
I don't think the application fee is a deterrent in terms of you know, what they're getting out of it if we do get through the process. And so, and again, we're betting it enough up front that they're not losing $2,500 typically, because we haven't had one actually go forward that got denied, or one that maybe didn't get fully approved or something like that. And that's based on, again, vetting it a lot up front before actually submitting application.
So,
So-
oh, sorry, go ahead.
So say you have 10 applicants who come to you in a year's time. Of those, how many do you think make it through the process? 8, 2? I mean,
It all depends on the project and what they're proposing. I mean, it's a case-by-case basis with every TIF.
okay.
If we were to get 10 applications and they were all downtown and they all had environmental remediation, maybe there's something there. Or maybe, if they all came in at the exact same time, maybe it's one district that gets created again. But, we don't see 10 applicants.
The reality for us is that we don't see that many even come to us
I
to
think
start with.
our development community is, aware of how we handled TIFs in the past and kind of really how the administrations, previous and current, are looking at administrating the TIFs and what's acceptable for TIF. And so I think that knowledge, they know that they need to bring a good project forward before it will even be considered.
We are in the process of looking at some additional downtown redevelopment sites. One is an old Sioux steel site, and then some rail yard land that we've acquired. And so we expect that some of those will end up with TIF projects. But again, that fits into the mold of how we started the program of focusing on downtown redevelopment.
So some might consider a $2,500 application fee to be exorbitant. How would you justify that?
Well, I think that, when we go through our process, we're doing a lot of internal review, but also sometimes we bring in a third party to do some third-party review of some of the expenses. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but the city's incurring, significant costs in some of these to actually just review the process and review the documentation, and ultimately, $2,500 wouldn't even cover staff time to review some of these. But I think, again, when we talk about what they're bringing forward, what they're looking to receive, $2,500 is a minute amount compared to a $4 or $5 million TIF that could help benefit their project in the future.
We used to just charge $500, and when we started looking at the amount of time and the review, just with city staff, it could be public works, the attorneys, finance, planning, community development, and you start to add up that time in addition to bringing in some outside expertise to review the plans.
So you also said that, you made the comment that you do a lot of vetting up front. The applicant is fairly sure that they've got a solid case to bring before the city council. You're giving the planning commission and the city council and the mayor briefings. So you get to the you've done the pre-briefing or the education 101 on TIFs. You get to the hearing. How many times has the applicant come in and gotten more than what staff was comfortable authorizing?
They have.
Never.
So does the applicant get an opportunity to talk to the city council at that time?
They could, but they've not done that I can recall.
I mean, we're gonna cover some of this here in the future slides, but we're vetting this with them. I mean, it's a joint process. We're not just sitting in a room without the developer there. We're telling them what we're willing to support, what the administration's willing to support in terms of this TIF. And to really see it come through and get approval, this is what you're gonna need to bring forward. And, they understand that if it's a $4 billion TIF that we're willing to grant, that's what they're coming forward with. They haven't asked at the public hearing for additional funds at that time.
So Patsy,
That's gonna have to take a shift in.
I was just gonna say, that's not everything that these two gentlemen have just said, our Rapid City staff works with the applicant as well.
We try to work with them, but, they typically have votes on the council before they even bring it to us. So, there really needs to be a shift in the council's thought process to make sure that, before the application is reviewed by council, even on a one-to-one, that staff has had an opportunity to work with them. Because, generally that doesn't happen now.
We've actually experienced almost the opposite of our council questioning why we're allowing that amount of reimbursement.
Well, we've had those questions raised too.
Yes.
But it all seems to happen at the hearing. And that's where we hear from staff and from the applicant, as well as ask all the questions. So,
The applicants don't feel like they need to negotiate with us.
And I will tell you from staff perspective, I don't feel like we've ever felt that we're empowered to say, this, yeah, this is as strongly as we're getting better, but to say, this is what they're asking for, but we only support X dollar amount and why. It's kind of been where we didn't, I guess I didn't feel like I had support to be able to be that forthright in the public meeting. I could talk to people one-on-one and have those conversations, but it's definitely a,
it's a totally different process than what we're experiencing, yeah.
I think ours has been historically conservative throughout since 1989. And so the development community